and change you'll ever get is from God. It's going to come from the Lord, or it's not going to come at all. It's going to come when you admit that you can't do it and that you've got to have His help.
Even Jesus explained that when somebody actually sees what the kingdom is all about, they run to it. So that should let us all know these people who are trapped in sin, these people who do terrible things in the world, they shouldn't be condemned, but we should be patient because one day they'll have their moment. And that means many of those of you, I say us believers, many of us believers, we have enemies that we have somewhat passed a sentence on. People voice this every day. We've really got to inspect what we're saying because we have cut ourselves off from talking about a great many topics. Some topics are so loaded, you can't bring them up in a conversation like this. Of course, I would, because Jimmy cracked corn. See, I believe that everybody on earth has fallen short of the glory of God, meaning they didn't quite hit the mark, that all of us are working out our salvation. You know, the Bible says you are to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. But listen to me, that's voluntary. That is not a statement that you point at a person and say, you need to be saved. Nobody should ever say that. That's almost like, because if you say you need to be saved, now I mean to a person forcefully. And let me explain myself, because that's a comment a lot of people make. Let me give you the back overtones, emotional overtones to it. I'm not talking about those, a pastor who may talk and say you need to be saved. That's different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those who would meet a person face to face and condemn them for everything they're doing and tell them to their face, not with a smile, but with a type forcefulness, being overbearing. Tell a person straight to their face, you need to be saved, with an attitude. Have you guys ever seen that? I've seen people do that with an attitude. You know what that's called? Provocation. That's what it's called. It's not telling a person what they need to do. People know what they need to do according to the living God because He puts that knowledge in them. But in times past, so many things have been mixed in with aggression. And even that statement has become loaded. Because the truth is, anybody should be able to say that statement and no one should be offended. But if you offend a person by your statements, normally it's because you overstepped your bounds and there's no relationship established. Suppose a bunch of people come into COT and at the end of COT I say, folks, you need to be saved. That would not be a forceful statement. Do you know why? Because they volunteered to come. You guys volunteered to come. But if I'm out there on the street, I should never approach someone and tell them what they need to do. That's provocation. Do you see the difference? I know a lot of Christians who say, well, I try to tell them, but they won't listen to me. It's because you're provoking them. You're telling them what they need to do as though you're much smarter than they are. That's provocation. That's not a message of love, because humility is never absent a message of love. Even in the Bible, you read in the Bible about Jesus Christ, and one of the characteristics you can see of Christ is that He was humble. We're talking about the Word of the living God that does not fail. He was humble. But when we learn something, sometimes we learn something that's so impactful to us, we want to rush and go tell everybody else what they need. Like a song. Yeah, you need to get this song. That'll calm your mind down. When you're in a relationship with somebody, it's very different. You know why? I've always seen this. When you are in a relationship with someone, you don't blurt things out like that because you care about them. And the last thing you're going to do is drive somebody away that you truly do love. And so I've seen a lot of Christians, when they really love someone, they never tell them they need to be saved, even when they're not saved. Only when they've been in it so long they start getting tired of each other do they start telling the other what they need to do. But when they're trying to accommodate everything in the other person, they're very patient. They're very patient. Why? Because they value that relationship. It's only when they're provoked or they get tired of it, or they've been in it too long and there's no change, they start pointing fingers, or somebody is mean, or things like that happen. Why is a person patient in the beginning? It's because they don't want to drive the person away. In our lives, Jesus did not come to our face every single day and say, you need to be saved or you're going to die. That's not what He did. It was a moment that came in our lives, a moment when we requested that moment, a moment when we said, Lord, I don't know what to do. A moment when in our spirits we called out for Him. Shortly after then, He gave you a moment of clarity, of understanding, not to tell you what you need to do, but to demonstrate the truth of His coming and of the kingdom. He gave you a moment when it all made sense. That moment, that very emotional moment. You guys remember the moment when you realized for the first time in your life how much of a scoundrel you really were? Do you remember that moment? Because compared to God, that's a moment where all of us would be scoundrels. Remember when you saw in a moment of time, you could remember everything you did in your life that was wrong? You remember that? In a moment of time, you had absolute clarity. And you said, oh Lord, I am so sorry. You apologized to God Almighty for living that way. You remember that moment? That was the moment. Now that moment didn't come 15 times in your life. No. It didn't come like that. God did not give you that moment every single day. No, He doesn't work like that. It was a special, intimate moment because He loves us. He knows the timing in which He can introduce these things. He does not do it on a continuous basis, but He did in that moment. He opened everything. One time I said, Lord, do you remember how you opened up my mind and you showed me in a moment of time? I remembered everything. Can you do that again, please? I used to ask Him that for closeness. Anybody ever feel like they're not close enough to Christ? You feel like you're slipping in your own mind, like somehow, wait a minute, I'm not as close to Christ as I should be. But then when He shows you who you have really been, the true you, those things you're not proud of, and He conveys that message of love anyway, and that blow your mind? That makes you love Him even more. Your love for the Lord is always going to be based on how you saw yourself in the past. And if you're like me, you saw a lot, and you're very thankful. I remember 2012 for a lot of people, and they didn't tell anybody. But many Christians were hopeful 2012 was real. Now, they didn't talk about it. They didn't tell a soul, but internally, it's almost like they were transmitting prayers. I hope that's real. Get rid of all this because then I won't have to put up with any of this anymore. And that was a time when you found yourself spiritually homeless also. It almost felt like you did not have a spiritual home and that something had to show up to let you know what home was. Many of you at that time, if something would have shown up, it would have been the answer for you. Many in the world got built up like that. And then the night that it was over, and no one ever talks about this. No one talks about it. But if you're like me, if you're a simple person like me, like somewhat of a kid, right? You can sense another person. I never felt so much external depression in my life. It's almost like that day after it was over, it was the greatest letdown the world ever had. It was almost like people began to pack things up. They were saying, just forget it. And then many Christians went back to the Word to find a dry word. You don't have to admit it, but I don't believe the Lord lies. I also don't believe He gives anybody gifts that do not work. And I trust whatever He gives me. And it took people a while to build back up again, but it made an impact. You can almost tell it made an impact because not one Christian ever mentioned 2012. They want to get away from it as fast as they could. And when it failed, nobody wanted to hear anything about Revelation. Nobody wanted to hear anything about prophecy. You guys remember that? I remember I wanted to hear somebody talk about prophecy one day because I do that. I get nosy. I said, what's so-and-so thing about prophecy? But it was talking about it. I said, well, I can't believe this. And then that's when a new spirit came into the earth, it seemed. And when that spirit came into the earth, it caused a mistrust, the mistrust of all leadership around the globe. Shortly after, we had the Egypt situation that was sparked by a guy setting himself on fire. You guys remember that? That got other people riled up, but here's what it actually did. In case you missed it, here's what actually happened. People were empty and they had almost nothing to believe in. They needed something to believe in, but because all the Christians were also kind of let down but didn't tell anybody, they weren't exactly on fire. And during that time, a spirit entered and gave people something to believe in. And it took hold and people listened. You guys have forgotten the days of carnage because what happened in the Middle East echoed over here and it grew. It grew. See, because when prophecy failed the world, people didn't want to hear anything about prophecy and they didn't know what to trust. They were angry, they were empty, and things were dry. That's when darkness took advantage of this emptiness. They began to work all over the place. And that's also when people began to talk about not the destruction of the world, but how rotten the government was. Surely you guys remember how rotten it was, and that became a real topic, as it is a topic to this very day. Because if you have, and just in case you have forgotten, in 2012, hardly anybody was talking about the government, not like they are today. They weren't talking about the government. They were talking to each other. They were talking about survival. They were talking about what they should be talking about now. They were talking about prior to 2012. And something zapped the conversation of prophecy right out of people. My point is, these stages that you went through, the whole world went through, there were several things that happened and got us up to this point. I've not heard them reflected on. It's almost like people dodged them. Now, we won't say it all, of course, this topic. because I'm going to a different topic. I'm using that as an example to show you processes the entire world has been under, so that you guys can see, yes, the world has been under the same process. Everybody's going through this stuff, but why? Why has everybody gone through such a similar thing? And then right now, through mistrust, listen, because after 2012, I call that the day prophecy failed in the hearts of many. Even the believers were let down because they just wanted something to happen so they wouldn't have to put up with the mess that was in the world, didn't they? They didn't want to put up with the mess. Possibly something was wrong in your family. You say, well, if what they say happens, I won't have to worry about that. It'll be done. I'll be going home. And many got excited. They wanted to go home when it didn't happen. It's almost like somebody saying, I'm going to be at the airport to see you after all these years. In 5 hours, you go to the airport, nobody shows up. So let down until we get up to this point. Now, at this point, we're dealing with scars from that time. People are skeptical of what they hear. A lot of Christians have broke off into factions, and those factions stand against one another. See, prior to 2012, with all the talk of 2012, all of the explanations, all of the presentations, all of what was brought forward, people believed by weight of the evidence. Very seldom did a person go to the Lord and say, Lord, is this 2000 stuff real or not? No, what people did was by weight of the evidence. They believed it, they received it, and they kept it. Now here's the problem with that. When you believe something by weight of evidence. When you believe something by weight of evidence, for example, evidence is if you go fill your car up full of gas. This is going to seem crazy, but it gets the point across. If you fill your tank up full of gas in your car at, say, 11 o'clock at night, you drive it home, you're ready for work the next day, whatever you're going to do. You're going to, if you have something to do, you're going to get your keys, you're going to get dressed, get your keys, go out to the car, start it, and take off. Why? Because you know you filled it up the night before. There's no problem with that, is it? Sure it is. It is a problem with that. Because the guy that did not fill his car up, you know what he's going to do? The guy that barely made it home the night before and he has problems with his car, you know what that guy's going to do? Who's going to be in a better position here spiritually? The guy with the car that barely made it home, or the person that filled their car up at night who was responsible, filled it up at night. They wake up and go to the car, they go to work, they have no worries about gas or anything else. Why? Because they did the responsible thing and filled it up the night before. But the other guy who did not fill it up because he couldn't, and he got home that night, he's probably all fumes, and he has to go somewhere the next morning. Who's going to be in a better standing in the morning spiritually? You ready for this answer? The guy who barely made it home, not the person who did the responsible thing, filling it up themselves. Let me tell you why. The person who barely made it home, if they're Christian, they're going to be praying a lot. Lord, get me home in this car, Lord, please. And when they get home, they're going to celebrate. Lord, thank you. They're going to celebrate up until the moment where they realize they have to go out in the morning. So they're going to be a bit nervous. And they're going to be saying, Lord, please take me to my destination so I can get some fuel or something. They might be a little nervous. They may not sleep too well, but they're talking to the Most High. They're depending on the Most High. They're serious about their communication with the Most High. They don't have things so confidently that they need not speak to the Most High. They're talking to the Most High. They're evaluating themselves. Because when you speak to the Most High, things are going to start changing in your life. The person who did the responsible thing, got the gas at 11 o'clock, may know they have to get up in the morning, go to work. They're going to sleep peacefully. Why? Because they took care of things. But also, they're going to get home. They're going to say, oh, I'm tired. Let me go to bed. They're going to go to bed. They're going to wake up in the morning. They're going to realize, I filled it up last night. All right, let's get some things going in this. They're going to hop in a car and just go. Normally, they won't speak to the Most High until something goes wrong. Because they think they're good to go. They got it all. They have to do all that. It's unnecessary. They took care of it. They have no request at the moment because it's taken care of. So they won't speak. Because by weight of the evidence, their confidence has been built up. In what? In a tangible thing and not the Most High. Because they're believing in what they did the night before. And because they took care of it, there's no need to pray for it. No communication or limited communication. Versus the guy who got home on fumes and is not sure how he's going to make it to work. His communication line with the Most High is going to be wide open. Why? Because he needs intervention. When you, by weight of evidence, believe in your own resolve, you don't need intervention. It takes a situation to request intervention. And this is where a lot of Christians stood prior to 2012 because somebody else gave them something with a lot of evidence. They were waiting and hoping on that time to come secretly. Well, they weren't praying for intervention about anything because everything was going to blow up. And so the communication with the Most High was a bit limited because everybody was so focused on the weight of evidence, John Slogovich gave them, that they already had that figured out. So they need not talk to anybody about that because John solved that problem and Jacob solved that one over there and Bob solved this one over here. And so a lot of Christians who are walking around with these weird emotions, sometimes excited, sometimes anticipating, other times excited, couldn't wait to hear the next bit of news on anything with 2012. The internet usage was off the scale. Sales of supplies were off the scale. And by weight of evidence, they believed in something that wasn't even real. This is what I want to get across to you. It wasn't real. But you can tell anybody that prior to 2000. It got to the point where a lot of Christians couldn't even say anything about it. I remember in 2012, somebody said, well, something's going to happen. I said, sure is. The calendar is going to go to another day. That's what's going to happen. And they got mad at me because I kept saying the same thing. I even had that conversation. I said, why is it that a person won't seek their Father for a true answer when they have a question about something, but by weight of evidence? Because man presents to them and convinces them by weight of evidence. They won't talk to the Father about it. That's dangerous. People were so quick to hop on the bandwagon and believe. It was almost like losing a bunch of your friends to something you knew was not real. And there was nothing you could do about it because by weight of evidence, many believed. And that's just the way it was. Now, when it didn't happen, that's when all the spins and things came out. But the Christians went through a phase. That was a blessing. See, because at first they believed by weight of evidence. It did not line up with Revelation. Some people try to make it fit. It did not line up with Revelation. It did not line up with the Word of God. But people believed it by weight of evidence. And when the big letdown came, a lot of people rejected all prophecy. They didn't want to hear anything about any prophecy. But something changed. God woke his own children. God woke them up through 2012. Was it painful? Was it depressing? Was it a letdown for a lot of people? You better believe it. But it takes that to get people to wake up and change. That's what I want you to see. And the change was this. After 2012, people stopped believing by weight of evidence and they started talking to the Most High again. They said, I got to have a higher source to let me know this, or I just don't know it. I cannot deal in the world of facts. I cannot deal in this world where things are presented and they have all the evidence in the world that does not make it real. I'll seek the Lord. And more people started seeking the Lord. Why? Because they just got let down. By all the evidence in the world, they got let down. And where do they go back to? The source. Now I'm bringing this point out. That was not a good time for a lot of people, but working up to it, it was thrilling until the days started to approach 2012 and nothing took place. I remember a lot of Christians when we had certain incidences in the sky and earthquakes of weird type things would happen, and that would convince people more and more. Geology seemed to be in pace with 2012, but it didn't work out that way. So that's why I say it was a letdown on everybody. But after everybody was let down, they said, nope, I got to sober up. That's the first thing a lot of people began to think was, I can't do that anymore. And even though a Christian would not communicate it to anybody else, they too were hoping something would take place on 2012 to free them from their current burdens. But when it all failed, that's when the Christians went through a period of growth. And they said, no, I don't care how much evidence a person has. I don't care how many tsunamis and earthquakes we have. No, that answer is going to come spiritually. I'm not buying the evidence thing ever again. I don't care if everybody says it's right. I'm not doing it. And that was actually a good time for Christians, but that was only one of many changes because they started seeking the Lord. And that's when people got, listen, the most amazing thing happened. Prior to 2012, the entire conversation was about prophecy. After 2012, it was about Yeshua HaMashiach. It was about Jesus of Nazareth. It was about basic principles. People started going back to the Gospels. Prior to 2012, everybody was in the Old Testament finding evidence, and in Revelation and in all the prophetic books trying to find evidence of why the earth was about to come to an end. But after it, everybody went back to the base principles of faith because all the other stuff was disproven. Listen, that's my whole point. We are in human bodies with human cravings built in a specific way, and we can easily be given over to ideas like that. We can change in a bad way a lot, given time, given evidence, given the right type of manipulation. So first, don't say it can never happen because it already happened. People were already led astray by 2012. So we go through this process and these things do take place. But Christians understood, more and more Christians understood where home was. A lot of people had to eat crow. I remember certain people said, well, I'm just cancel my show. Then they started talking. But listen, right after they got back to Christ, they went right back through a process again. It was a political process. People started blaming the government for pushing the 2012 stuff. I couldn't believe it. The very people they said they would never trust, they started to point the finger at. In fact, that's when the finger pointing started. They started blaming leadership for their problems. People became bitter, very bitter. But that too was necessary. But do you see how 2012 took the average Christian from believing anything and everything by weight of evidence back to the basics of faith? Do you see that? Now when somebody says something, you guys, no matter how much evidence they give you, you're not going to accept it at face value. You're not going to move or act on that thing unless the Lord has given it to you too. Isn't that something? You can't be fooled like that again. It took the situation of 2012 to get us here to this point, or we would be gullible again. That's why we have to be responsible. But I'm showing you this stage because a lot of people ask the question, they have it in their hearts right now. Why am I going through all of this? And here's what I want to tell you. A lot of people, they start out in life going through problems. They don't understand why they have them. We've talked about it here, but I'm going to give you a small angle on something. But here's a major point of tonight's talk. Many of you have issues and problems, and you're asking the Lord, Lord, please alleviate some of the stress at least, Please alleviate. And you have that mindset of trying to solve your problems. We just went through a heap. We just went on a trip back in the past to show you how these issues, they work a work that no other thing can work, how they grow you. And some people have been fighting for so long to get out of the same issue that they're starting to do just what they did prior to 2012. This is what I want to get at. By weight of the evidence of your problem, you're convinced it's a problem. But that's not what the Bible teaches us, and that's not what the Lord taught us. Now, because this is such a heavy challenge in thinking, it might even give you a headache. And I already know a lot of people, they can't accept it yet, but in time they will. I know I didn't think of this all by my lonesome. This came a different way. These issues, problems that everybody has in their lives. You guys started out with these issues and problems, and you made requests of the Most High from the heart. Many of you said, Lord, help me to be strong. Some of you have a heart's desire to be in such a position that individual that withstands you in all ways that you love so much that one day they'll finally listen and they won't go on that destructive path you see them on. And you're trying, you want the Lord to give you something that will help you communicate even the small things to these individuals so they won't die. So your reasons are genuine, is my point. But you ask for that of the soul. These are requests of the soul. There's some of you out there, you're single, and you see certain people going through problems, and nobody's lifting a hand to help them. And you prayed, Lord, empower me somehow to be of some use to someone. You requested that of the soul. See, it's not greedy because you don't care if people know you or not. You just want the other ones to live. You want the other ones to make it. You want the other ones to see it. So it's not some selfish prayer. It's a request of the soul. And God normally answers those requests of the soul. Did you know that? But a lot of us don't know how He does it. So let me give you the short and narrow here. Many of you have asked for these things, and you've had on a small scale a taste of something. For example, some of you've been given the resolve to help another person, but when you went to help them, you were overcome by some family situation or something that was deeply disturbing, something that overwhelmed you emotionally or something of that nature, stopping your work for the Most High, didn't it? It put a halt to it. It got in your way and put a halt to it. Something happened. And it got in the way of it. It got in the way so much, it's almost like somebody shut the front door on you, locked you in your house, and unless you get past the front door, you can't do anything for anybody. And you've asked the Lord, Lord, can you do something about this? It is slowing me down. But what does the Word say? That you have a victory, and you've been empowered over the enemy. That's what the Word says. He's giving you power to tread upon scorpions and serpents, and He's giving you all power over the enemy. So what's the problem? And that's the problem. You're asking what's wrong, and that's the wrong question. You're the ones who have a heart for other people. You're the ones who have passions to do things for the Lord, and things have stopped you. How many people have been halted from doing what they need to do for somebody else because something evil, something corrupted, something got in your way? And you prayed to the Lord to remove it, and He said no. And you've looked all throughout the Bible to try and see, now who else had a situation like this that was just stuck with them like somebody superglued a problem to you? And you're wondering, this is what you have to consider. Put your seatbelts on. We go through a diversity of things in this world. many problems in this world. We get stopped, we get harassed, intimidated. We overcome only to get stopped again. We have obstacle after obstacle, and we still missed it. It started when we were young, and we're still missing it. In the Bible, I looked at the walk of Christ. One time, with his own disciple, he said, "Get behind me, Satan." All the other times he walked right through him. There were crowds of people that wanted to kill Jesus. And in the Bible it says Jesus was tempted in all points as we are, but without sin. How did he do it? Why did his work continue? And if he was in the body like us, why was he not stopped? It's right there in the Word of God in the New Testament. He kept walking through it. Then he would walk over it. How did the apostles do it? They were jailed. They were beaten. Yes, they were. So how did they overcome it? How did God remove it? No, God never did remove it. You know what happened? They overcame it. Because it wasn't the first time they went to jail, and it was not the last time they went to jail or were beaten. They overcame it because they had a request that the work of the Holy Spirit go forward through Christ Jesus. And that request was answered. And God did something he's doing to you. He's been doing it to you. But if you're seeing it the wrong way, by weight of evidence, you believe it's a problem, you'll never notice it's a blessing. Because it's so evident right before your eyes, it's an issue. It's a problem. It's not supposed to be there. You'll never see it's the answer to a soul prayer, to your heart's desire. You'll never see it. And here's how. We just talked about 2012 and how people fell for it, how upset they were by it, but how it ultimately gave people the strength to continue to hear stuff like that, but not act on it. People still talk like they talked prior to 2012. It's just that you're not acting on it. You're not falling for it. You grew, you outgrew it. You became victorious over that tactic, and you don't fall for it anymore. The problem never went away. You became victorious over it. It's kind of like when you catch a cold or a virus. The virus doesn't go away and never comes back. It comes back multiple times. But once you become immune to it, you don't have the symptoms of it because your body knows how to destroy it before it can ever get started. God makes you the same way, granting you an immunity from those things in your life that used to stop you, like when you were in grade school or when you were in high school. There were people that would talk about you that would ruin your day, make you not want to go to school, but then you outgrew it. And people never stopped talking about you. You just stopped giving up by it. Now they can talk about you all day and you just keep strolling through it. Somebody will say, well, they're talking about you. Yeah, okay, well, let them talk. Let me get on with my business. It doesn't even bother you emotionally. Why? Because you become immune to it. I noticed something medically. Viruses make no sense. At the time when they hit, what they do in the human body, they make no sense. It's like using a weapon against somebody, but then you end up making them stronger by that same weapon. They make no sense because they only strengthen the immune system. In just about all cases, once you have a virus, your immune system is increased about 87% every single time. When you catch a cold, your immune system is increased by about 42% every single time. You're not worn down by these things. You're built up by these things. Now, everybody sees a cold and a virus as a big problem because by weight of the evidence, by what they feel, by what they see, by what they've heard, it's nasty, but they don't realize it's causing a person to become much stronger. It's like a broken bone. You break a bone, it's going to go back twice as strong. And it's just simply not going to break the same way anymore. It's going to break a different way because now that part of the bone that was broken has twice the bone mass on it. Every time you're broken, you come back twice as strong. But by weight of evidence, we keep calling these things problems, not realizing what they are. We have a Father in heaven that loves us. We have doctors in hospitals. They want to fix people. In order to fix a person of something that's life or death, often you have to cut in a person. That's very painful. Can you imagine if a person was awake? If a person was awake, they could not undergo surgery very well. Not in these days. Back in the old days, they did. Do you know that? They didn't have anesthesia. They didn't have that stuff. Fill them up full of liquor, and the guy would scream and holler for about 10 days. And they would willingly go through this so they wouldn't die. They would endure it so they wouldn't die. But my point is this. We think to do damage to someone is to destroy them, when clearly that's not what's happening. When these obstacles damage you by way of the eye, they're actually empowering you to overcome. And because God will allow or not allow, He's the one that said you would have trials and tribulations. Who's allowing them to take place? Who's allowing Satan to continue to exist? Who's allowing these demons to continue to operate? Who's allowing these spirits to run about? Our Father is. Why? Probably for the opposite reasons we thought. Because we were thinking by weight of evidence. And when you're convinced by what you see, you'll no longer have faith in what is real. 2012 was an example of that. Even in the Bible, it tells you what your trials and tribulations are for. Now, let me give you a small instance of this. There was a person who, every time they had some money, they couldn't help but to spend it. And the person could not control themselves. They tried every way but Sunday to break this habit, and it wouldn't work. And so one time, this person went out and overspent on clothing and dumb things, right? They bought everything they thought they ever wanted. But this time, the money didn't come back so fast. They were barely living for about a year because they owed so much. And everything they had purchased ended up being nothing. They got to the point where they hated everything they had bought. They were broke so long, it finally sunk in. Money does not grow on trees. Once it's gone, it just doesn't come back. And after a year of nobody helping this person out, and this person barely making it, this person finally learned the lesson. And right after this person made a specific declaration, wouldn't you know it, everything was restored. But this time, this person never made that mistake again. In fact, they found out that shopping and all this marketing and all this is a ploy. Her situation broke her. It broke her in one way, but it built strength up in her so much that now she'll never go through that same problem again. But it took that situation, and it took her to endure it to make her immune because it was stopping her future. Can you imagine if God would have blessed that person? They could have been easily tempted, and she wouldn't be doing a good work for the Lord. She would have been an embarrassment or something like that. When something halts you from doing the Lord's work, He will make you immune to it. He will harden you by it. That means when you're going through something, He's operating. And guess what happens? After He's done, you'll never be fooled that way again. And if you look carefully at your life and inspect it, you're growing by leaps and bounds. Don't look at your life by weight of evidence. Look at your life by way of what you have faith in and what you seek the Lord for. Because if you're one of these people, you don't have to seek the Lord, that you can go find your own answers, you're in trouble. It's when you seek the Lord, that's when your faith begins to flourish. And all the problems in your life are hardening you that you won't fall to it ever again. And here's the lastly, you're the one that asked for it. And the Lord knows exactly what He's doing. Can you imagine if we all sat around and say, I want to go have surgery. Oh yeah, that sounds fun. I'm going to have it too. No one likes that. But we know it's necessary. In a lot of cases, don't we? We know it's necessary. It is not fun. It is traumatic, but it strengthens you. And it provides a way for you to overcome what was stopping you in the first place. And that's what your Father in heaven is doing. So whenever you say, Lord, get me out of this situation, that situation, remember something. You wouldn't even have that situation unless He loved you. It's in your way. Something about that situation is revealing a strengthening that's happening in you that you'll never be stopped by it again. Something is being worked out that no other situation could work out. No talk could work out. Even if the Lord could give you the mindset to do it, the problem is we'd be stopped by so many sidetracks it wouldn't even be funny. Many of you can be bought down by somebody talking about you in the wrong way. If the Lord had you to where a lot of people get to know you, but you're saddened by people's negative comments, how can you go forward into a crowd of people who want to kill you with the gospel? That's what Jesus did. He walked with the good news, but He walked through crowds that were ready to kill Him and plotted to kill Him. Never once did it halt His passion. Sometimes He had to divert His route, but He continued the work. Do you see what I'm saying? You're not made to get out of everything. That's not why things come. Not so you can get out of it. You are to go through it. Because if you look carefully, those situations and issues, they never stop coming to you. You have just overcome them. They don't bother you anymore. Remember when you moved out on your own and you got that first termination bill? Had your stomach up in knots. Oh, I just don't have enough. This job doesn't pay enough. This, that, and the other. Doesn't work that way anymore. Remember when you first got on Facebook and you first got on social media? Don't try to act like you didn't do it, but people got on there, they were talking and everything, it was good, and then one of your cousins, relatives, friends said something bad, and you caught somebody talking about you, and your heart sunk. You found out a truth, but your heart sunk, and it stopped that good feeling you had. Remember you said something you shouldn't have said to the wrong person? You made a mistake? Oh, I meant that for somebody else. It's too late. Remember that? Remember all those circumstances and situations that had you upset and everything else? What did it actually break in you? It broke quite a bit. Those situations helped to prepare you to operate in this environment of social media, of the sharing of information, but you're not paranoid. Remember how everybody used to say, the government's looking at me. They're going to find out what I'm doing. Nobody cares. People used to be paranoid about that until they seriously considered that they're going to continue to do this. In fact, before you use your phone or anything else, you agree to let them see everything. Half the political arguments you've heard on television, they have died. That's why I encourage people not to become a part of that stuff, not that political rhetoric, because it changes just like the wind. By weight of evidence, they believe one thing. 2 years later, they act like they never said it or it doesn't exist. Even the crowds of people who were upset and all these facts they had at the time, they didn't pan out, but they just forget about it and dream up something else. Don't become a part of that. Many of you, you're immune to this political stuff now. You see what it leads to and where it goes. You see what happens, and still other people, they're going to be made immune too. Why? There's a real work to be done. This is a very real time. And unlike 2012, that everybody prepared for and nothing took place, this one's going to be the opposite. Hardly anybody's going to prepare for it because nobody's giving the evidence for it, because there is no evidence for what's about to happen. And when it takes place, it's going to gouge a memory in the minds of humanity. And that day is coming upon us very soon. It's not just going to do it once. It's going to be like that from that day forward. All these issues and problems that you guys have, did you ever at any moment think that the unthinkable could take place? And I guarantee you, all your problems are going to go out the window once a disaster of magnitude takes hold. You're not going to have problems. The same thing that's keeping you up at night now, you're not even going to give thought to in times to come, because it will be so big. It'll be the biggest problem humanity has ever seen. And be reminded, in the Bible it says, there has never been a time like it, or will be after. You know what that means? It'll be the worst time humanity and the earth has ever seen and endured. You cannot compare it to anything, and it's coming. You're being fortified. The problem is, by weight of evidence, you're still believing their problems. I hope that you guys can see that. Don't do the 2012 thing, believing things by weight of evidence. Now is the time of liberty where you can ask the Most High, what is this? And the Lord will show you the truth. The times are coming, and you're alive for a reason. You're not just passing the time. All of you are highly purposed, and it's a good time to search out the Father's truth. Not the truth of the eye or the truth of the world, but your Father's truth. He did not make a mistake when He made you. He didn't make a mistake to have you sent here. Your situation is fortifying and bringing about who God sent here. Not who we want somebody to be, not what we want to be, but who God sent here, His child. In the end, all of us will be fortified so much that we will not deviate on our faith. That means if somebody threatens to kill us, if a situation threatens to kill us, God will have fortified us to the point where we will walk through the danger in holiness for the sake of the goodness of the Lord and His calling. None of us will shy away from it. That's why you read in Revelation how that they served the Lord up until the point of their death, if necessary. Why? Because God fortified them. We can't do that. God is fortifying us. But all of what would make you turn away now and save your own skin, it's not going to be here when that time comes. Now do you see it? Many things will drive you away from that line of faith. You can be scared away. You can be intimidated away. During that time, nothing will work. You will have been fortified. This is the point our Father's bringing all of us to.